She was the woman they destroyed. He was the man no one dared to cross. And when he chose her in front of everyone who had buried her alive, the entire kingdom held its breath. Alara Vance had learned to survive in silence, until the night Duke Rowan Ashcroft shattered every rule and dragged her back into the light. What began as a calculated alliance became a war neither of them expected to fight. Betrayal, revenge, and a love forged in the wreckage of their pasts. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The ballroom glittered like a lie. Alara Vance stood at its edge, half hidden behind a marble column, watching the world that had once swallowed her whole. Chandeliers dripped with crystal, each piece catching the light and throwing it back in sharp, brilliant fragments. Silk gowns swept across polished floors in waves of rose and gold and midnight blue. Laughter rang out in sharp, brittle bursts, the kind that cut deeper than insults ever could. She didn't belong here. Not anymore. But her cousin had insisted. "You can't hide forever, Alara. People forget. Time heals all wounds." Time didn't heal. It just made the wound harder to see. She smoothed her hands over the fabric of her gown, a deep emerald green, borrowed from Margot's wardrobe and slightly too tight at the waist. The fabric was beautiful, the stitching immaculate. It was also 3 years out of fashion. In a room like this, that was blood in the water. "Is that?" The whisper came from somewhere to her left. Alara didn't turn. She knew better. "It is. I can't believe she has the audacity to show her face. After what happened with Lord Ashford, shameless. Absolutely shameless." The voices slithered past her like smoke, curling around her shoulders and settling in her chest. She kept her chin level, her expression carefully blank. She'd learned that much in the years since the scandal. Never flinch. Never let them see you bleed. The moment you showed weakness, they descended like wolves. A server passed with a tray of champagne, moving through the crowd with practiced invisibility. Alara took a glass just to have something to hold. The bubbles fizzed against the crystal, bright and mocking. She didn't drink. She just needed the prop, something to occupy her hands so they wouldn't shake. 3 years. 3 years since Lord Ashford had cornered her in a darkened library at a house party in the countryside. 3 years since she'd fought him off with everything she had. Nails, teeth, a brass candlestick that had left a dent in the mahogany desk. 3 years since she'd fled that room with her dress torn and her dignity shredded, only to wake the next morning to rumors that she had tried to seduce him. That she was desperate, unhinged. A woman scorned and dangerous, his word against hers. And he was a lord. She was no one. The scandal had spread like fire through dry grass. Within a week, her engagement to Viscount Harlow had been broken. A terse letter delivered by courier, no explanation offered because none was needed. Her friends had stopped calling. Invitations ceased arriving. Her parents, humiliated and desperate to salvage what little reputation remained to their family name, had sent her away to the countryside, an exile disguised as a prolonged visit to distant relatives. She had gone quietly. What else could she do? Scream? Fight? Demand justice? She'd tried that. It had only made things worse. So she'd learned to be silent, to be small, to take up as little space as possible in a world that had already decided she didn't deserve any. But now she was back. Not because she wanted to be. Not because she believed anything had changed, but because Margot had begged, and Alara had finally run out of reasons to say no. "Just one night," Margot had said that morning, clutching Alara's hands in her own. "Just come to one ball. Let them see you're not broken. Let them see you've moved on." But Alara was broken, and she hadn't moved on. She'd just gotten better at pretending. "Stay close to me," Margot had whispered earlier that evening as they'd stepped out of the carriage, her voice warm with protective determination. "I won't let anyone hurt you." But Margot was dancing now, swept up in a waltz with Lord Pembroke's second son, her face flushed with joy and champagne. She'd forgotten her promise. People always did. They meant well, but good intentions dissolved the moment the music started and the wine flowed. Alara took a sip of champagne. It was too sweet, cloying. She set the glass down on a passing tray and immediately regretted it. Now her hands had nothing to do. She folded them in front of her, unfolded them, clasped them behind her back. Across the room, a woman in a gown of ice blue silk leaned toward her companion and whispered something behind a gloved hand. Both of them glanced at Alara. Both of them smiled. Alara looked away. The orchestra shifted into a new waltz. The crowd swirled and reformed like water finding new channels. Everywhere she looked, there were faces she recognized. Women who had once taken tea in her mother's parlor. Men who had danced with her at her debut. They all looked through her now, as if she were made of glass. Or perhaps just invisible. She glanced toward the door, calculated the distance. 30 feet, maybe 40. If she moved quickly, if she kept to the edges, she could slip out before anyone noticed. Still pretending you're invisible? The voice came from directly behind her, low, amused, male. Alara stiffened. She didn't recognize it, but she knew the tone. Another aristocrat looking for entertainment at her expense. Another man who thought her scandal made her fair game. She turned slowly, already preparing the cutting remark that would send him away. The man standing there was tall, broad-shouldered. His coat was black, perfectly tailored to his frame, but he wore it like armor, not decoration. His hair was dark, touched with silver at the temples, despite what looked like only 40 years or so of living. His eyes, cold, slate gray, the color of winter storms, studied her with the kind of precision that made her feel like she was being catalogued, assessed, measured for worth. He wasn't smiling. Most men smiled when they approached her. It was usually the first warning sign. "I'm sorry," she said carefully, keeping her voice level and polite. "Have we met?" "No?" "Then perhaps you've mistaken me for someone else." "I haven't." Alara's grip tightened on her skirts. "Then I'm afraid I don't understand what you want." "I want," he said, his voice flat and matter-of-fact, "to know why you're standing in a corner like you're waiting for permission to exist." The words hit like a slap. She opened her mouth, closed it. Heat crept up her neck, anger and humiliation tangling together in her chest. "Excuse me? You heard me. I don't know who you think you are. Rowan Ashcroft." Her breath caught. Duke Rowan Ashcroft. War hero. Widower. One of the most powerful men in the kingdom, and by all accounts, one of the most feared. She'd heard the stories, everyone had. He'd commanded armies in the brutal northern campaigns against the mountain clans, returned a decorated legend with medals and scars, and a reputation for ruthlessness that made even seasoned generals nervous. Lost his wife in childbirth 2 years ago and hadn't been seen in society since. Until now. Until tonight. She stared at him, her mind racing, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with the stories. He looked tired, older than his years. There was a hardness to him, a weight that seemed to pull at his shoulders even as he stood perfectly straight. "Your Grace," she began. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't curtsy, don't stammer, don't apologize." His gaze didn't waver, pinning her in place. "I didn't come over here to watch you fold in on yourself like you're apologizing for breathing." Anger sparked in her chest, hot and sudden and surprisingly welcome. It had been so long since she'd felt anything but numb. "Then why did you come over here?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "Because I'm tired of watching this room full of vultures circle you like you're already dead." Alara blinked. What? "You've been standing in this exact spot for 23 minutes, he said, his tone clinical, as if he were reciting a military report. "You took exactly 3 sips of champagne. You avoided eye contact with everyone except the servers. You looked at the door 4 times like you were calculating how quickly you could leave without causing a scene." He tilted his head slightly, the gesture almost predatory. "Am I wrong?" She hated that he wasn't. She hated that he'd noticed. She hated that he was here, standing in front of her, pulling her into the light when all she wanted was to disappear. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing." "Then why are you talking to me?" "Because no one else will." The honesty of it stole the breath from her lungs. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The music swelled around them, a waltz, bright and relentless, the kind of music designed to make everything seem beautiful even when it wasn't. Couples spun past in a blur of color and laughter, lost in their own worlds. Rowan's expression didn't change. He didn't look away. "You're Alara Vance," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "The woman they ruined." Her throat tightened. I see my reputation precedes me. It does. He paused, studying her face. But not the way you think. And how do you think it precedes me, Your Grace? As a warning, he said simply, that this world eats people alive and calls it justice. Alara stared at him. She didn't know what to say, didn't know what this was, didn't know if he was mocking her or if he actually meant it. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally. Because I have a proposition for you. Her stomach dropped. She'd heard that line before. It never ended well. I'm not interested. Not that kind of proposition. His tone was clipped, businesslike. A marriage contract. The world tilted. What? You heard me. You're insane. Probably. He shifted his weight slightly, his gaze never leaving hers. But I'm also serious. Alara laughed, a short, disbelieving sound that came out harsher than she intended. You don't even know me. I know enough. You know nothing. I know you were engaged to Viscount Harlow 3 years ago, he said calmly, ticking off facts like he was reading from a ledger. I know Lord Ashford spread lies about you to cover his own crimes. I know your family exiled you to the countryside to avoid the scandal touching them directly. I know you came back tonight because someone, probably your cousin, convinced you it was safe. And I know you're standing here right now wishing you'd never walked through those doors. She couldn't breathe. How do you... I make it my business to know things. He said it without pride or arrogance. Just fact. Especially when those things involve men like Ashford. That doesn't explain why you'd want to marry me. Because I need a wife, he said flatly, and you need protection. Protection from what? From this. He gestured toward the ballroom with one gloved hand, the movement sharp and dismissive. From them. From a world that's already decided you're guilty and won't ever let you prove otherwise. Alara shook her head, trying to clear the fog of confusion and disbelief. You're out of your mind. Maybe, but think about it. His voice dropped lower, forcing her to lean in slightly to hear him over the music. Right now you're invisible. Worse than invisible. You're a ghost, a cautionary tale, the woman they point to when they want to remind their daughters what happens when you step out of line, when you don't know your place. He paused, letting the words settle. But if you marry me, you become untouchable. Untouchable, she repeated slowly, testing the word on her tongue. Because you're a duke. Because I'm me. There was no arrogance in his voice, just cold, hard fact. No one crosses me, Miss Vance, not anymore. Not after what I did in the north, not after... He stopped himself. They fear me. And if you're mine, they'll fear you too. Fear, she said, not respect. Respect is a lie people tell themselves to sleep better at night. Fear is honest. His eyes hardened. And it keeps you alive. Alara studied him. There was something deeply wrong with this man, she realized. Something broken and sharp and dangerous. He wasn't offering her a fairy tale. He was offering her a weapon. And what do you get out of this? She asked. A wife who won't expect me to love her. The bluntness of it was almost refreshing. You're serious, she said slowly. I am. You want a marriage of convenience. I want a marriage of mutual benefit. He straightened slightly, his shoulders pulling back in a way that reminded her he'd once commanded men into battle. You get your life back, your name back, a position in society that no one can touch. And I get... He hesitated, just for a second, something flickering in those cold gray eyes. Someone who won't flinch when I don't smile. Someone who won't expect warmth I can't give. Alara's chest tightened. What happened to your wife? His jaw clenched. She died. I know. I'm sorry. But that's not what I asked. He was silent for a long moment. The music swirled around them, couples dancing, the world spinning on as if this conversation wasn't happening, as if her entire future wasn't balancing on the edge of a knife. She deserved better than me, he said finally, his voice rough. And I failed her. I was gone, always gone, fighting someone else's war, chasing someone else's glory. And when I finally came home, she was... He stopped, swallowed. She died screaming my name, and I wasn't there. The rawness in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't a man who showed weakness. This wasn't a man who admitted failure. But he'd just done both. I'm not looking for redemption, she said quietly. If that's what you think this is, I'm not offering it. He met her gaze, and there was something almost desperate in it, buried deep beneath the ice. I'm offering you a choice. A choice. Yes. Between what and what? Between this. He gestured again toward the crowd, toward the whispers and the stares and the slow, suffocating death of being invisible. And something different. Different how? Honest, he said. No illusions, no pretty lies, no pretending this is something it's not. Just two people trying to survive a world that wants to break them. Alara's pulse was loud in her ears. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat, in her fingertips, in the tight space behind her ribs. You don't know me, she said again, the words feeling hollow even as she spoke them. I know enough. You don't know what they say about me, what they'll keep saying. I know exactly what they say. His voice hardened, frost settling over steel. And I know it's a lie. She stared at him. How? Because I know the man who started it. His eyes darkened, something cold and violent moving behind them. And I know exactly what he's capable of. A chill ran down her spine. Lord Ashford. Rowan didn't answer. He didn't have to. The confirmation was written in every line of his face, in the way his hands curled into fists at his sides. Why do you care? She asked, her voice barely audible. Because I'm tired of watching guilty men walk free while innocent people burn. He leaned in slightly, and she caught the scent of leather and smoke and something darker. Because I've seen what men like him do when no one stops them. And because... He stopped, drew a breath. Because someone should have protected you, and no one did. There was something almost dangerous in the way he said it, something that made her think he wasn't just talking about her. Alara swallowed hard. And if I say no, then I'll walk away, and you'll go back to hiding in corners, waiting for the world to forget you exist. That's not fair. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's the truth. She wanted to hate him for it, for the arrogance of walking up to her and offering her a lifeline like it was nothing, like she should be grateful, like she didn't have a choice. But he was right. She didn't have a choice. Not really. She was hiding. She had been hiding for 3 years, and she was so tired of being invisible. I need time, she said, her voice shaking slightly. You have until the end of this waltz. That's not... It's all the time either of us has. He glanced toward the center of the room, toward the spinning couples and the watching crowd. In about 30 seconds, Lady Pembroke is going to look over here and realize I'm talking to you. In 60 seconds, half the room will be watching. And in 90 seconds, you'll have to decide whether you're going to spend the rest of the night explaining to strangers why a duke is wasting his time on a scandal. Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. You planned this. Of course I did. You bastard. Yes. He held out his hand, palm up, steady as stone. Now decide. The music swelled. The waltz was building toward its crescendo, violins climbing higher and higher. Alara looked at his hand, scarred knuckles, broad palm, calluses that spoke of swords and hard work, and a life that hadn't always been lived in ballrooms. She looked at the ballroom, the glittering lie of it, the beautiful poison. She looked at him, this cold, broken, dangerous man who was offering her something no one else ever had. Not love, not happiness, but a way out. If I say yes, she said slowly, this isn't a fairy tale. I'm not a prince, he said, and you're not a damsel waiting to be saved. Then what are we? Two people trying not to drown. She believed him. She didn't know why, but she did. Alara placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, warm, real. He pulled her toward the center of the floor, and the room seemed to part around them like water. The music continued. The dancers kept spinning, but one by one heads began to turn. Conversations faltered, eyes widened, mouths opened in small, shocked O's. Alara's chest tightened, panic clawed at her throat. Don't look at them, Rowan said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise. Look at me. She did. His eyes were steady, unflinching. He placed one hand at her waist, proper, formal, but firm enough that she could feel the strength in it. He raised her other hand, positioning them in the traditional waltz hold, and then they were moving. The waltz swept them into its current, and for a moment, Elara forgot how to breathe. Her feet stumbled over the steps she'd once known by heart. She nearly tripped, but Rowan's grip steadied her, guiding her through the motions with a precision that spoke of military training, not ballroom lessons. "I haven't danced in years," she whispered, her voice tight with panic. "Then follow my lead." She did. The room blurred around them, colors bled together, rose and gold and emerald and sapphire all melting into one shimmering haze. She could feel the weight of every gaze, every whisper, every sharp intake of breath. They were watching, all of them. "They're staring," she said. "Let them. They think I've seduced you. They think I've... Let them think it." His voice was low but hard as iron. "Let them think whatever the hell they want. It doesn't matter." "It does matter. You don't understand what it's like." "I understand perfectly." He spun her, the movement sharp and controlled. "I understand that you've spent 3 years letting their opinions dictate your entire existence. I understand that you've made yourself small because they convinced you that you didn't deserve to take up space." His grip tightened slightly. "And I understand that if you keep living like that, they win." Elara's breath hitched. "Do you want to spend the rest of your life afraid of what they think?" he asked, his gray eyes boring into hers. "Or do you want to make them afraid of you?" The question hung in the air between them, sharp and vital. She thought about the last 3 years. The silence, the shame, the way she'd learned to make herself invisible, to apologize for existing, to accept that this was all she deserved. She thought about Lord Ashford, still attending parties, still welcomed into society, still laughing with his friends while she rotted in exile. She thought about every person in this room who had looked through her, who had whispered about her, who had decided she was guilty without ever asking for her side of the story. And something inside her, something that had been buried deep and quiet for far too long, stirred. Elara met his eyes, and she smiled, not a soft smile, not a polite one, not the kind of smile she'd been taught to give to make other people comfortable, a smile with teeth. Rowan's mouth curved, just barely, but it was there. "There she is," he murmured. The waltz ended. The final note hung in the air, shimmering and then fading to silence. The room erupted into polite applause, the kind that was more reflex than genuine appreciation. Rowan didn't let go of her hand. Instead, he turned toward the crowd, toward the sea of stunned faces and gaping mouths and wide, disbelieving eyes, and raised her hand slowly to his lips. The kiss was brief, formal, the kind of gesture that might have been dismissed as mere courtesy. But in this room, in this moment, it branded her. Every eye was on them. Every breath was held. "Elara Vance," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden shocked silence, loud enough for half the room to hear clearly, "will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The silence was deafening. Somewhere, a woman gasped. Someone dropped a glass, the crystal shattering against marble with a sound like breaking ice. Elara's mind screamed at her to run, to laugh it off, to make a joke, to disappear back into the shadows where she belonged. But she didn't. She looked at the faces staring back at her. Lady Pembroke with her mouth hanging open. Lord Ashford, yes, he was here in the corner, his face going pale and then red. The women who had once been her friends, now frozen in shock. The men who had once danced with her, now looking at her like she was a stranger. The same faces that had whispered, that had judged, that had buried her without a second thought. She looked at Rowan, this cold, scarred, impossible man who had just offered her a chance at something she'd thought was lost forever. Not redemption, not forgiveness, but power. And she spoke. "Yes." The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. The ripples spread. Someone gasped, louder this time. Someone else whispered something sharp and vicious, but Elara didn't care enough to make out the words. Lady Pembroke's fan clattered to the floor. Lord Ashford took a step back, his face twisting into something ugly. But Elara didn't look away from Rowan. His hand tightened around hers, just once. A brief squeeze that might have been approval or relief, or simply acknowledgement. "Good," he said quietly. His voice meant only for her. "Now, let's get out of here before they remember how to think." He turned, keeping her hand firmly in his, and began walking toward the exit. The crowd parted, not willingly, not gracefully, but they parted. No one stopped them. No one dared. They walked through the ballroom in complete silence, Rowan's stride steady and unhurried, Alara's heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. The whispers started as soon as they were 10 feet away. Did that just... Is she really the Duke of Ashcroft? With her? After what she did? This is madness. Alara kept her chin up, kept her eyes forward, kept moving. They reached the entrance. Rowan collected his coat from an attendant with a single gesture. He draped his cloak over Alara's shoulders without asking. It was heavy, warm, smelling of smoke and winter air. Then they were outside. The cold night air hit her like a physical force, stealing her breath. Alara stopped on the steps, her legs suddenly shaking. Rowan turned to look at her. "Are you going to faint?" "I don't faint," she said automatically. "Good. Because I'm terrible at catching people." Despite everything, despite the insanity of what had just happened, despite the fact that her entire life had just changed in the space of 5 minutes, she laughed. It came out shaky and a little hysterical, but it was real. Rowan's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "What did I just do?" she whispered. "You just declared war," he said simply, "on everyone who tried to destroy you. I don't know how to fight a war." "You'll learn." He glanced back at the ballroom, at the lit windows and the shapes of people pressing against the glass, trying to see them. "Besides, you won't be fighting alone." Alara pulled his cloak tighter around her shoulders. "I don't understand you." "You don't have to." "Why are you doing this?" "I told you." "No." She shook her head. "The real reason, not the practical one. Why do you actually care what happens to me?" He was quiet for a long moment. His breath misted in the cold air. "Because someone should have cared 3 years ago," he said finally. "And no one did. And that's..." He stopped. Started again. "That's unacceptable. You can't save everyone." "I'm not trying to save everyone." He met her eyes. "Just you." The words settled between them, heavy and strange. A carriage pulled up, black and unmarked. Rowan opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Alara hesitated. "What happens now?" "Now, we make them sorry they ever thought you were someone they could destroy." She climbed into the carriage, Rowan followed, settling onto the opposite seat. The driver snapped the reins and they lurched into motion. Through the window, Alara watched the ballroom recede into the distance, the light and music fading until it was just another glow in the darkness. She had just agreed to marry a man she didn't know. She had just walked away from the only world she'd ever known. She had just started something she had no idea how to finish. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt alive. Rowan was watching her. "Having second thoughts?" "Too many to count," she admitted. "Good. That means you're paying attention. When do we..." She stopped, unsure how to phrase it. "When does this become real?" "It's already real," he said. "The moment you said yes in front of witnesses, it became real. By tomorrow morning, every household in the city will know. By tomorrow afternoon, the scandal sheets will be printing it. By tomorrow evening, there will be no going back." Her stomach twisted. "That fast?" "That fast." He leaned back against the seat, his face half in shadow. "Welcome to your new life, Miss Vance. I hope you're ready." Alara looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly. "I'm not," she said honestly. "Neither am I," Rowan said. And somehow, that made her feel better. The carriage rolled on through the dark streets, carrying them both toward whatever came next. The carriage stopped in front of a townhouse Alara didn't recognize. 4 stories of gray stone, windows dark except for a single lamp burning in what looked like a study on the 2nd floor. The street was quiet, too quiet for the fashionable district they'd just left behind. "Where are we?" she asked. "My house." Rowan opened the door and stepped down, offering his hand. Or one of them. She took his hand and descended carefully, the borrowed gown catching on the carriage step. The night air was colder now, biting through the cloak he'd given her. "I thought you'd take me home." "I will. After we talk." "We just talked." "No," he said, leading her toward the front door. "We made a deal in front of witnesses. Now we discuss terms." The door opened before they reached it. A butler stood in the entrance, older, gray-haired, his face carefully neutral in the way that suggested he'd seen far stranger things than his employer bringing home an unescorted woman at midnight. "Your Grace," the butler said with a slight bow. "Graves, this is Miss Vance. She'll be staying for a short while." "Of course, sir. Shall I prepare tea?" "Whiskey," Rowan said. "In my study." Graves didn't even blink. "Very good, sir." Alara followed Rowan inside, her shoes clicking against marble floors. The entrance hall was austere. No portraits, no flowers, no personal touches that might indicate someone actually lived here. Just dark wood paneling and a staircase that curved upward into shadow. They climbed to the second floor in silence. Rowan pushed open a door and gestured her inside. The study was warmer than the rest of the house. A fire burned low in the grate. Books lined every wall. Military histories, philosophy, what looked like engineering manuals. A massive desk dominated one corner, covered in papers and maps. Everything was organized with military precision. Rowan shrugged out of his coat and tossed it over a chair. Beneath it, he wore a simple waistcoat and shirt. No decoration, no flash. He looked more comfortable here than he had in the ballroom. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of two leather chairs near the fire. Alara sat, still wrapped in his cloak. She felt ridiculous suddenly, sitting in a strange man's study, wearing a borrowed gown and his cloak, having just agreed to marry him in front of half of society. What had she done? Graves appeared with a tray, 2 glasses, and a crystal decanter. He poured in silence and disappeared just as quietly. Rowan handed her a glass. She took it but didn't drink. He settled into the chair across from her, his long legs stretched toward the fire. For a moment he just stared into the flames, the glass turning slowly in his hand. "You should know what you're getting into," he said finally. "I thought that's what the ballroom was about." That was the easy part. He took a drink. "The hard part starts tomorrow." Alara set her glass down on the small table between them. "Then tell me." He was quiet for a moment, as if deciding where to begin. "I wasn't lying when I said I need a wife," he said. "It's not just convenience, it's necessity." "Necessity how?" "My late wife's family blames me for her death. They're not wrong." He said it flatly, without self-pity. "They've been working for the past year to have me declared unfit to manage my own estate. They want control of my title, my lands, my fortune." Alara frowned. "Can they do that?" "They're trying. They have allies in the House of Lords. They've been spreading rumors that I'm unstable, dangerous, that the war damaged me beyond repair." His jaw tightened. "Some of it's true. But if they succeed, everything my family built for 300 years ends up in the hands of people who want to carve it up and sell it off." "And a wife changes that?" "A wife shows stability, continuity. An heir would seal it completely, but even just a marriage makes their case harder to argue." Alara's stomach turned. "You want me to—" "No." The word was sharp. "That's not what this is. I'm not asking you to share my bed. I'm asking you to share my name." He leaned forward slightly. "Everything else is negotiable." She studied him. "You're serious? I don't joke about contracts. This is insane." "Yes." He didn't deny it, "but it works for both of us. You get protection, status, freedom to rebuild your life. I get a wife who understands this is business, not romance. And when your in-laws realize, they already know I can't stand them. Having a wife they don't approve of will only confirm what they already think. But it doesn't matter. Once we're married, their legal case collapses." Alara picked up her glass and took a drink. The whiskey burned going down, but it steadied her. "What else?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "You said this was the hard part. A political marriage to frustrate your in-laws isn't hard. What aren't you telling me?" Rowan's expression darkened. "You're perceptive." "I'm not stupid." "No, you're not." He set his glass down. 3 weeks ago, I started receiving letters. Threats. A chill ran down her spine. "What kind of threats?" "The kind that mentioned my late wife by name. The kind that describe how she died in detail no one outside that room should know." His voice was controlled, but she could hear the rage beneath it. "The kind that promise the same thing will happen to anyone I try to protect." Alara's breath caught. Someone's threatening to kill your future wife? Yes. And you still asked me to marry you? I asked you because of it. He met her eyes. Whoever is sending these letters wants me isolated, alone, vulnerable. They want me to stay that way. Marrying you is a direct challenge to them. You're using me as bait. I'm using you as a declaration of war. His voice hardened. There's a difference. Alara stood up, the cloak slipping from her shoulders. She paced to the window, looking out at the dark street below. You should have told me this before. Would you have said yes? She didn't answer. I'm not going to let anything happen to you, Rowan said behind her. I have guards, resources. I've been fighting my entire adult life. I know how to keep people safe. Your wife died. The words hung in the air like smoke. When she turned around, Rowan was standing, his face carved from stone. Yes, he said quietly. She did, and I'll carry that failure until the day I die, but I won't make the same mistake twice. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll destroy anyone who tries. There was something terrifying in the certainty of his voice. This wasn't bravado. This was a man who had killed before and would do it again without hesitation. Alara wrapped her arms around herself. Show me the letters. What? You said you've been receiving threats. Show me. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then he crossed to his desk and pulled open a drawer. He withdrew a small stack of envelopes, maybe 6 or 7, and handed them to her. The paper was expensive, heavy, the kind aristocrats used for formal correspondence. Alara opened the first one. The handwriting was elegant, almost feminine, but the words made her skin crawl. You couldn't save her. You won't save the next one either. She'll scream your name just like Catherine did, and you'll arrive just in time to watch her bleed. Her hands shook. She opened another. Every woman you touch is marked for death. Do you really want more blood on your hands, Your Grace? Or will you finally learn to stay alone? Another. I know what you dream about. I know you see her face every time you close your eyes. The next one will haunt you twice as hard. Alara set them down on the desk, her stomach churning. How long has this been happening? She asked. 3 weeks, 1 letter every few days. And you went to the authorities? I went to people I trust. The authorities are useless. Half of them are in my in-laws' pockets. He crossed his arms. I have men investigating. So far, nothing. These aren't random. Alara picked up one of the letters again, studying the handwriting. This person knows you. They know details about your wife's death that weren't public. I know. So it's someone in your household, or someone close to your late wife's family, or someone I served with in the north, or someone at court, or... He shook his head. The list is too long. That's the problem. Alara set the letter down carefully. And you think marrying me will draw them out? I think whoever is sending these wants me powerless, alone, haunted by guilt until I'm no use to anyone. His eyes were hard. Choosing you, choosing to move forward despite their threats, that's a message. It says I'm not afraid, and fear is the only weapon they have. That's assuming they're trying to control you. What if they just want you dead? Then I've been a target for 20 years and I'm still here. He said it without arrogance. I'm hard to kill, Miss Vance. I've had a lot of practice surviving. Alara looked at the letters again. The elegant script, the intimate knowledge, the calculated cruelty of every word. This is a woman, she said suddenly. Rowan's head snapped toward her. What? Look at the handwriting, the phrasing, the way they focus on emotional wounds rather than physical threats. She picked up another letter, pointing to a line. She'll scream your name just like Catherine did. This isn't about power. It's about jealousy, about making you suffer for moving on. Rowan stared at her. I think whoever is sending these is someone who loved you, or thought they did, and they can't stand the idea of you with anyone else. His face went carefully blank. I haven't been with anyone since Catherine died. Doesn't matter. The threat of it is enough. Alara met his eyes. Who wanted to marry you before? Who expected you to choose them? Rowan was silent for a long moment. Then he cursed, low and vicious. Lady Margrave, he said. Who? Beatrice Margrave. She's... He stopped. She was Catherine's closest friend. After Catherine died, she started visiting, offering condolences, helping with estate matters. His jaw clenched. I thought she was being kind. But she kept coming, and she started making comments about how Catherine would want me to move on, how she understood me better than anyone. Did you encourage her? No, I barely spoke to her beyond basic courtesy. He paced toward the fire. But she was persistent, and when I finally told her directly that I wasn't interested, He stopped. What? She told me I'd regret it, that I needed someone who understood loss the way she did, that choosing anyone else would be a mistake I couldn't undo. Elara's heart raced. When was this? 4 weeks ago. Right before the letters started. Yes. They stared at each other. It could be a coincidence, Rowan said, but he didn't sound convinced. Do you believe that? No. Elara picked up the letters again, reading through them with new eyes. The rage beneath the elegant words, the possessiveness disguised as concern. If it's her, she said slowly, then marrying me makes this worse. You understand that, right? This won't scare her off. It'll escalate things. Good. She looked at him sharply. Good? If she's making threats, I want her exposed. I want her careless. And I want her stopped before she hurts someone. His voice was cold. Right now, she's in the shadows. But if we force her hand, she'll make a mistake. And when she does, I'll end this. By end this, you mean whatever it takes. Elara should have been frightened. She should have walked out of this house and never looked back. But she wasn't frightened. She was angry. Angry at Lord Ashford, who had destroyed her reputation and walked away untouched. Angry at the society that had believed him without question. Angry at 3 years of silence and shame and hiding. And now this woman, this Beatrice Margrave, thought she could terrorize Rowan into submission? No. Elara had spent 3 years being a victim. She was done. All right, she said. Rowan turned. All right, what? All right, I'll marry you. But not just for protection. She crossed her arms. I want something else. Name it. I want Lord Ashford destroyed. Rowan's expression didn't change. Explain. You said you know what he's capable of. You know he lied about me. I want him exposed. I want everyone who believed him to know the truth. I want his reputation in ruins the way mine was. Her voice shook with barely controlled fury. That's my price. Rowan studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd just found a kindred spirit. Done, he said. Just like that? Just like that. He walked back to the desk and picked up a pen. I'll have my solicitor draw up a marriage contract. Your terms will be included. Ashford's ruin in exchange for your cooperation. And the threats? We deal with them together. He looked at her directly. But you need to understand something. If we do this, if we move forward, there's no backing out. Once we're married, you're part of this war whether you like it or not. And these people don't fight clean. Neither do I, Elara said. Not anymore. Rowan's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. A knock at the door interrupted them. Graves entered without waiting for permission. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but you have a visitor. Rowan frowned. At this hour? Lady Margrave, sir. She says it's urgent. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Rowan and Elara exchanged a look. Show her in, Rowan said quietly. Graves hesitated. Sir, Miss Vance is... I know. Show her in anyway. Graves bowed and left. Elara's heart hammered. What are you doing? Testing a theory. Rowan's voice was calm, but his eyes were hard as flint. If she's the one sending the letters, she'll know I was at the ball tonight. She'll know I danced with you, and she'll have come here to confront me about it. And if you're wrong, then we've wasted 5 minutes. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. A woman's voice, high, sharp, speaking to Graves. The door opened. Lady Beatrice Margrave swept in like a storm. She was beautiful, dark hair, pale skin, expensive gown of deep crimson. But her eyes were wild, unfocused, her mouth twisted in something that might have been a smile or a snarl. Rowan, she said breathlessly, thank goodness you're home. I heard the most terrible rumor and I had to... She stopped. Her gaze landed on Elara. For a moment no one moved. Who, Beatrice said slowly, is this? Rowan's voice was ice. This is my fiancé. Beatrice's face went white, then red, then white again. You're… what? Miss Alara Vance were to be married. That's impossible. And yet, Rowan gestured toward Alara. Here we are. Beatrice took a step forward, her hands clenched at her sides. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Beatrice? I've been there. I've supported you. I've mourned with you. I didn't ask you to. Catherine would have wanted. Don't! Rowan's voice cracked like a whip. Don't you dare use my wife's name to justify whatever this is. Beatrice's eyes filled with tears. I loved her too, and I love you. Can't you see that? Can't you see I'm the only one who understands what you've lost? I see someone who has overstayed her welcome. The words hit like a physical blow. Beatrice staggered back a step. You don't mean that. I do. She's using you. Beatrice pointed at Alara, her hand shaking. That woman is a scandal, a liar. She tried to seduce Lord Ashford, and when he refused her, she… That's enough. Alara stood, her voice cutting through Beatrice's hysteria. I don't know you, but you clearly don't know me. So I suggest you stop repeating lies before you embarrass yourself further. Beatrice whirled on her. How dare you? I dare because you walked into this house uninvited at midnight to throw a tantrum. Alara stepped forward. And because I'm the one Rowan chose. Not you. Beatrice's face contorted with rage. You're going to regret this. Both of you. You have no idea what you've… She stopped herself. Too late. Rowan moved faster than Alara would have thought possible. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed Beatrice's wrist. What was that? He asked quietly. Nothing. I didn't. You just threatened us. I didn't. After sending me letters for 3 weeks doing the same thing. Beatrice's eyes went wide, panicked. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Rowan's grip tightened. And now I know too. Beatrice tried to pull away, but his hold was iron. Let go of me. Graves, Rowan called. The butler appeared instantly, almost as if he'd been waiting just outside. Fetch the constable. Tell him I need someone arrested for criminal threats. Beatrice's face went chalk white. You're insane. I haven't done anything. You've been sending me threatening letters for weeks. You just admitted it. I did no such thing. You said we'd regret this, that we have no idea what we've done. Rowan's voice was deadly calm. The only way you could know what we've done is if you've been watching me, waiting for me to move on, and punishing me for it. Beatrice's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. It was you, Alara said softly. You wrote those letters. No. You wanted him isolated, haunted, too broken to ever choose anyone else. Alara's voice hardened. Because you thought if you just waited long enough, he'd turn to you. Beatrice's face crumpled. He should have. I was Catherine's friend. I understand him. I could have… You could have what? Rowan's voice was soft now, dangerous. Replaced her? Is that what you thought? I loved you. You loved a fantasy. He released her wrist like it burned him. And you terrorized me for it. Graves appeared in the doorway. The constable is on his way, Your Grace. Beatrice looked around wildly, at Rowan, at Alara, at Graves blocking the door. This is a mistake, she whispered. You're making a terrible mistake. You'll see. Graves, escort Lady Margrave to the parlor and make sure she stays there until the constable arrives. Of course, sir. Beatrice didn't resist as Graves took her arm, but as she was led from the room, she looked back at Alara and smiled. It was the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. The door closed behind them. Alara's legs gave out. She sank into the chair, her hands shaking. Rowan poured her another glass of whiskey and pressed it into her hands. Drink. She did. The burn helped. That was insane, Rowan finished. Yes. She's not stable. No. He ran a hand through his hair. I should have seen it sooner. You couldn't have known. I should have. He looked at her. Are you all right? I don't know. Alara laughed, a shaky, breathless sound. I agreed to marry you 2 hours ago. I just helped you unmask a woman who's been terrorizing you. And tomorrow, all of society is going to know my name again. She looked up at him. Am I all right? No, absolutely not. Rowan's mouth twitched. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a moment, the fire crackling between them. What happens now? Alara asked. Now the constable takes Beatrice into custody. We give statements, and tomorrow, he paused. Tomorrow, we get married. Tomorrow? The license can be arranged by noon. We marry by evening. His eyes were steady. Before she can do anything else, before her family can interfere, before anyone can stop us. Alara's heart raced. That's fast. That's survival. He leaned forward. Are you in or out? She should say out. She should run. She should in, she said, and meant it. The wedding happened so fast, Alara barely had time to process it. One moment she was standing in Rowan's study, agreeing to marry him by evening. The next, she was being hustled into a carriage at dawn, still wearing the same borrowed green gown, her cousin Margot crying and clutching her hands. Are you sure about this? Margot whispered, her eyes red. Alara, you don't have to. I'm sure. But you barely know him. I know enough. Alara squeezed her cousin's fingers. Trust me, this is what I want. It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. The ceremony took place in a small chapel on Rowan's estate, witnessed by Margot, Graves, and a skeletal priest who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Rowan wore black. Alara wore the green gown. There were no flowers, no music, no illusions about what this was. A transaction, a shield, a declaration of war. When the priest asked if she took this man, Alara's voice didn't shake. I do. Rowan's kiss was brief, formal, his lips barely brushing hers, but his hand at her waist was steady, grounding her when the floor felt like it might give way. And just like that, she was a duchess. They signed the papers in silence. Margot cried harder. Graves produced champagne that no one drank. What happens now? Alara asked as they stood in the chapel's small antechamber, the marriage certificate still drying on the table between them. Now we make sure everyone knows. Rowan straightened his cuffs. The announcement goes to the papers this afternoon. By tonight, every drawing room in the city will be talking about it. And Beatrice? Still in custody. The constable is holding her on my statement, but without concrete proof of the threats, they'll have to release her within 48 hours unless we can tie her directly to the letters. Alara frowned. Can we? I have people looking into it. Handwriting analysis, paper suppliers, anyone who might have helped her. He glanced at her. But it's not enough. We need her to confess, or we need evidence that's ironclad. Otherwise, her family's lawyers will have her out, and the whole thing disappears. So we have 2 days. Less. Her father is Lord Chancellor. He has influence everywhere. Rowan's jaw tightened. The moment he finds out I've had his daughter arrested, he'll move heaven and earth to bury this. Alara's mind raced. Then we need to move faster. Doing what? Forcing her hand. She turned to face him fully. You said marrying me would draw her out. It did. But she's not done. Women like that, they don't just give up because they got caught once. Rowan studied her. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we give her an opportunity she can't resist. Such as? A ball. Alara's pulse quickened as the idea took shape. We announce our marriage publicly at a grand ball. Invite everyone. Make it impossible to ignore. And we make sure Beatrice is released just in time to attend. That's insane. That's strategic. Alara crossed her arms. Right now she's contained, watched. She can't do anything without the constable breathing down her neck. But if we let her out, if we give her a public stage where she thinks she has room to act, she'll do something stupid. Exactly. Rowan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching hers. You understand what you're proposing, he said slowly. You're making yourself bait. Again. I'm making myself unavoidable. Alara lifted her chin. You said you wanted to end this. So let's end it. But on our terms, not hers. A muscle worked in Rowan's jaw. If something goes wrong, then we deal with it. She stepped closer. I didn't marry you to hide, Rowan. I married you to fight. So let me fight. He stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then he nodded once. All right, we'll host a ball. 3 days from now. That gives us time to prepare and makes it believable. Newlyweds celebrating their union. And gives Beatrice just enough time to plan something reckless. Yes, his voice hardened, But we do this my way. Extra guards, locked exits, every guest vetted, and you don't leave my sight for a second." "Agreed." Rowan turned to leave, then stopped. "Alara." "Yes? If this works, if we expose her, it won't just be Beatrice who falls. Her family will come after us. They'll use every weapon they have." "Good," Alara said quietly. "Let them try." The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation that felt more like arming for battle than planning a celebration. Rowan's household transformed into a war room. Guards doubled. Servants were questioned about their loyalties. Every invitation was scrutinized. And Alara discovered exactly what it meant to be a duchess. She met with Rowan's solicitor, a thin, nervous man named Pemberton who handled the estate's legal matters. He walked her through the marriage contract clause by clause, his hands shaking slightly when he reached the section about Lord Ashford. "Your Grace," he said carefully, addressing Alara with a title that still felt foreign, "this clause regarding Lord Ashford's downfall, it's highly unusual." "Is it enforceable?" she asked. "Legally? No. But His Grace has made it clear that your satisfaction on this matter is a condition of the marriage's success." Pemberton glanced nervously at Rowan, who stood by the window like a sentinel. "And His Grace is quite persuasive when he wants something." "Good," Alara said. "Then make sure Ashford knows we're coming for him." Pemberton's face went pale. "Your Grace, I'm not sure." "Not. Do it," Rowan said without turning around. "Send word to Ashford's estate. Inform him that we have questions about events from 3 years ago, and that we expect answers. That will cause—" "I know what it will cause." Rowan turned, his expression cold. "Do it anyway." Pemberton fled. Alara found herself alone with Rowan more often than she expected. They took meals together, awkward, mostly silent affairs where they navigated around each other like strangers sharing a too small space. But occasionally, in the quiet moments, something else emerged. "You don't have to do this," Rowan said one evening as they reviewed the guest list for the ball. They sat in his study, papers spread between them, a fire crackling in the grate. "Ashford, I mean. I made you a promise, but if it's too much, it's not too much." Alara didn't look up from the list. "I want him to suffer the way I suffered. I want him to know what it feels like to have everything stripped away because of a lie. Revenge won't fix what happened to you." "No. But it might stop him from doing it to someone else." She met his eyes. "Isn't that what you said? That you're tired of watching guilty men walk free?" Rowan's mouth curved slightly. "You listen." "I pay attention." She returned to the list, scanning names. "Who's this? Lady Cordelia Thorne?" "One of Catherine's cousins. She'll come to assess you, decide if you're worthy of the family name. And if I'm not, then she'll spend the evening making sure everyone knows it." Rowan leaned back in his chair. "Catherine's family is complicated. They loved her deeply, and they blame me for her death just as deeply." "Were you there when she died?" "No." The word was flat. "I was 300 miles away, fighting a battle that didn't matter. By the time I got the message and rode back, she'd been dead for 6 hours. Alara set down her pen. "You couldn't have known." "I should have been there anyway." His hands clenched on the armrests. "I knew the baby was coming early. I knew she was frightened, and I chose glory over her." "You chose duty." "Same thing." "No," Alara said quietly. "It's not." They sat in silence for a moment, the fire popping and hissing. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Marrying her?" "Never." Rowan's voice was firm. "Catherine was—" He stopped. "She deserved better than me. But I loved her. And I'd marry her again if I could, even knowing how it ends. That's not how most people talk about arranged marriages. Ours wasn't arranged. Not really." His expression softened slightly. "We chose each other. Against her family's wishes, actually. They wanted her to marry someone with better prospects, fewer scars." He touched his temple absently, where a thin white line cut through his hairline. "But she didn't care. She saw something in me I didn't see in myself." "What was that?" "Someone worth saving." Alara's chest tightened. "And now you're trying to do the same for me." "No." Rowan met her eyes. "You don't need saving. You need a weapon. There's a difference." Before she could respond, Graves appeared in the doorway. "Your Grace, a letter has arrived, marked urgent." Rowan took it, breaking the seal. His face went carefully blank as he read. "What is it?" Alara asked. "Beatrice has been released." He handed her the letter. "Her father pulled strings. She's free." Alara's heart raced. "When?" "This afternoon." "That's too soon. The ball isn't until tomorrow night." "Which means she has 24 hours to plan." Rowan stood, pacing to the window. "Or to run." "She won't run." Alara stood as well. "She thinks she's untouchable now. Her father got her out, which means she believes she's won." "Then we prove her wrong." Rowan turned. "Double the guards. Move the ball up if we have to. I want every entrance watched and every guest searched." "Searched?" Alara frowned. "That will cause talk." "I don't care. If she's planning something—" "She is," Alara interrupted. "But not what you think. Explain." "Beatrice doesn't want to kill you. She wants to possess you." Alara thought back to the woman's face in the study, the wild desperation in her eyes. "She wants me gone. Dead or disgraced, doesn't matter. As long as I'm out of the picture." Rowan's expression darkened. "Then we make sure you're protected." "No. We make sure she can't resist trying." Alara's mind raced. "At the ball, we announce not just our marriage, but our plans. Heirs. A future. Everything she wanted and can't have. We make it so unbearable she has to act. You're proposing we provoke her deliberately. I'm proposing we finish this." Alara stepped closer. "You want her exposed? Then let's expose her. In front of everyone, so thoroughly that her father's influence can't save her." Rowan studied her, something like admiration flickering in his cold gray eyes. "You're dangerous," he said quietly. "I'm learning." The night of the ball arrived like an approaching storm, inevitable and electric. Alara dressed in a gown that Rowan had commissioned specifically for the occasion, deep sapphire blue, cut to perfection, with silver thread embroidered along the bodice in patterns that caught the light. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like a duchess. She looked like someone who belonged. A knock at her door. Rowan entered without waiting for permission, stopping short when he saw her. "Will I do?" she asked, trying for lightness and failing. "You'll stop hearts," he said simply. He wore black again, severe and military in its precision. But he'd added something new, a silver pin on his lapel, engraved with the Ashcroft family crest. "Your armor?" she asked, gesturing to it. "Yours." He crossed to her and held out a matching piece, a delicate silver brooch shaped like a shield. "So everyone knows you're under my protection." Alara let him pin it to her gown, his fingers steady against the fabric. "Are you ready?" he asked. "No." She met his eyes. "But I'm doing it anyway." His mouth curved. "Good." They descended the stairs together, and Alara felt like she was walking to her execution. The ballroom below blazed with light. Chandeliers, candles, lamps, all burning at once. The crowd was already thick, voices rising in a dull roar of speculation and gossip. Every face turned as they appeared at the top of the stairs. The room went silent. Rowan's hand tightened on hers. "Don't look at them. Look at me." She did, and they descended. The crowd parted. Whispers erupted like wildfire, but Alara kept her chin high, her expression calm. She could feel the weight of every stare, every judgment, every unspoken question. They reached the center of the ballroom. The orchestra fell silent. Rowan raised his hand, and the room quieted completely. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "As you've no doubt heard, I have recently married. I'd like to introduce my wife, the Duchess of Ashcroft." The words fell like stones. A few people applauded politely. Most just stared. Alara forced herself to smile, to nod graciously, to play the part. And then she saw her. Beatrice Margrave stood near the back of the room, half hidden behind a column. She wore crimson again, the color of blood and rage. Her face was carefully composed, but her eyes were wild. Rowan had seen her too. His grip on Alara's hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "Shall we dance?" he murmured. "Yes." The orchestra began. A waltz, slow and deliberate. Rowan led her to the floor, and they began to move. Around them, other couples joined, the dance floor filling gradually, but Alara could feel Beatrice watching, waiting. She's here, she whispered. I know. What do we do? We wait. Rowan spun her, the movement precise. She'll make her move, and when she does, we'll be ready. 3 dances passed. 4. The night wore on, champagne flowed, and the crowd relaxed into the rhythm of the celebration. Alara found herself surrounded by well-wishers, most of them clearly angling for information or favor. She smiled until her face hurt, answered questions with careful non-answers, and counted the minutes. And then Lady Cordelia Thorne appeared. She was older than Alara expected, perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair and Catherine's eyes. She studied Alara with the precision of a jeweler examining a questionable stone. "So you're the new Duchess," Cordelia said flatly. "I am. Catherine spoke of you once, years ago. Said you were kind." Alara blinked. "She did?" "She did." Cordelia's expression didn't soften. "But kindness doesn't make you worthy of her place." "I'm not trying to take her place." "Aren't you?" Cordelia stepped closer. "You married her widower. You wear her jewels." She gestured to the brooch at Alara's shoulder. "And you stand in her home as if you belong here. If that's not replacement, what is?" Alara's temper flared. "Catherine is dead. Rowan is not. And he deserves a life that doesn't end with her grave." Cordelia's eyes flashed. "How dare you?" "How dare I what? Speak the truth? Suggest that grief isn't a life sentence?" Alara's voice hardened. "I didn't know Catherine, but I know what it's like to be destroyed by people who claim to love you. And if her family truly loved her, they'd want Rowan happy, not haunted." Cordelia's face went pale, then red. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Then explain it to me." Alara held her ground. "Tell me why keeping Rowan miserable honors Catherine's memory." For a moment, Cordelia looked like she might strike her. Then her expression crumpled. "Because if he's happy," she whispered, "it means she's really gone." The rawness of it stole Alara's anger. "I'm sorry," Alara said quietly. "I know you loved her. She was like a daughter to me." Cordelia's voice shook. "And I failed her. I let her marry a man who was never home, who chose war over her, who loved her desperately and blames himself every day for not being there when she needed him most." Cordelia looked up sharply. "He told you that?" "He didn't have to. It's written all over him." Alara softened her voice. "I'm not Catherine. I'll never be Catherine, but I can be someone who stands beside him so he doesn't have to carry this alone anymore." Cordelia stared at her for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Perhaps you'll do after all." She walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Alara exhaled shakily. Her hands were trembling. She reached for a glass of champagne from a passing server and drank half of it in one gulp. That was well done. She turned. Lord Ashford stood beside her, his smile oily and familiar. Alara's blood turned to ice. "Lord Ashford," she said evenly. "Your Grace," he corrected, his tone mocking. "You've certainly risen in the world, haven't you?" "I married well." "You married desperately." His smile widened. "But I suppose that's what one does when one's reputation is in tatters." "My reputation was in tatters because of you." "Was it?" He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. "I seem to recall you throwing yourself at me in a darkened library. When I refused you, you became unpleasant." Alara's vision blurred with rage. "That's a lie." "Is it? Because that's what everyone believes. And belief, my dear, is all that matters in society." "Not anymore." Alara set down her glass carefully, willing her hands not to shake. "Rowan knows the truth. And soon, everyone will." Ashford's smile faltered slightly. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." "You have no proof of anything." "Don't I?" Alara stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You left marks, Ashford, on the desk where you attacked me. A dent from the candlestick I hit you with, and I kept the dress, the one you tore. Did you know that?" "I kept it. Every rip, every stain, every piece of evidence you thought would disappear." Ashford's face went pale. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Alara's smile was cold. "Why don't you wait and find out?" She walked away before he could respond, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. She found Rowan near the terrace doors, speaking with someone she didn't recognize. He looked up as she approached, his expression sharpening when he saw her face. What happened? Ashford, she said quietly. He's here, and he's nervous. Good. Rowan's eyes hardened. Where? Near the east side, but Rowan, there's something else. A scream cut through the ballroom. The music stopped. The crowd turned as one toward the source of the sound. Beatrice Margrave stood in the center of the room, a knife in her hand, and she was walking straight toward Alara. You don't deserve him, Beatrice said, her voice ringing clear and sharp over the shocked silence. Catherine's barely cold, and you've already taken everything from her. Her home, her husband, her life. Rowan moved, stepping in front of Alara. Beatrice, put down the knife. Why? Beatrice's laugh was high and wild. So you can pretend this is normal? So you can pretend you love her instead of mourning the woman you failed? This isn't about Catherine. Everything is about Catherine. Beatrice's hand shook, the knife catching the light. She was perfect. She was everything. And you threw her away for war and glory, and now you're replacing her with this? She lunged. Rowan caught her wrist, twisting it sharply. The knife clattered to the floor. Beatrice screamed, not in pain, but in rage. You'll regret this, she spat. All of you. You'll see. You'll all see what happens when you forget her. Guards appeared, dragging Beatrice back. She fought them, still screaming, her words dissolving into incoherent sobs. The crowd stood frozen, horror and fascination warring on every face. Rowan turned to Alara, his hands on her shoulders. Are you hurt? No, She couldn't finish. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving her shaking and cold. Get her out of here, Rowan ordered the guards. And this time, make sure she stays locked up. As they dragged Beatrice toward the exit, she twisted back one final time. Ask him, she shrieked at Alara. Ask him what really happened to Catherine. Ask him who was really responsible. The door slammed shut, cutting off her words. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Rowan pulled Alara close, his arms solid and steady around her. It's over, he murmured against her hair. It's done. But even as he said it, Alara couldn't shake Beatrice's final words. Ask him what really happened to Catherine. Ask him who was really responsible. And in the corner of the ballroom, watching with cold calculation, Lord Ashford smiled. The ballroom emptied faster than it had filled. Guests fled like water through cracks, their whispers trailing behind them like smoke. Within 20 minutes, only a handful remained. Rowan's guards, Graves hovering near the door, and Margot clutching Alara's hand with white-knuckled desperation. Are you all right? Margot whispered for the third time. Alara, please, say something. I'm fine. Alara's voice sounded distant even to her own ears. She was still standing in the center of the ballroom, still feeling the phantom weight of Beatrice's madness pressing against her chest. Rowan was across the room, speaking in low, clipped tones to his head of security. His face was carved from stone, but Alara could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands kept curling into fists. Lord Ashford was gone, disappeared the moment the guards had dragged Beatrice away. Of course he had. Men like him always knew when to vanish. Your Grace, Graves approached carefully, perhaps you should retire for the evening. This has been... No. Alara straightened, forcing steel into her spine. Not yet. She crossed to Rowan. He turned as she approached, something raw flickering in his eyes before he shuddered it away. Alara, what did Beatrice mean? She asked quietly. About Catherine. About who was really responsible. Rowan's jaw tightened. She was trying to hurt you. To plant doubt. I'm not asking what she was trying to do. I'm asking what she meant. They stared at each other. Around them, the remaining guards pretended not to listen. Not here, Rowan said finally. Upstairs. Now. He led her from the ballroom, Margot trailing uncertainly behind until Graves gently redirected her to a guest room. Alara followed Rowan through the silent house, up the stairs, past the study, to a door she'd never seen opened. His private chambers. He pushed the door open and gestured her inside. The room was sparse, military neat, a large bed that looked barely slept in, a desk covered in more papers and maps, weapons mounted on the walls, swords, rifles, things Alara couldn't name. Rowan closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly looking exhausted. Catherine's death wasn't an accident, he said. Alara's breath caught. What? The official story is that she died in childbirth. Complications, blood loss, these things happen. His voice was flat, reciting facts. But the midwife who attended her, a woman named Mrs. Holloway, she came to me 6 months after the funeral, told me things didn't add up. What things? Catherine was young, healthy. The pregnancy had been smooth. There was no reason for her to hemorrhage the way she did. Rowan moved to the desk, pulling out a folder. Mrs. Holloway said someone had given Catherine something that day, a tonic, supposedly to ease the pain. Elora's stomach turned. Poison? I don't know. Mrs. Holloway died before I could investigate further, a fall down her own stairs. He handed Elora the folder. Convenient timing. Elora opened it with shaking hands. Inside were letters, medical notes, a coroner's report that raised more questions than it answered. You think someone killed your wife. I think someone wanted her dead, and I think Beatrice knows who. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I have no proof. Rowan's voice cracked slightly. Just suspicions and a dead midwife and a wound that won't close. I can't bring charges against ghosts. Elora looked up from the papers. But Beatrice isn't a ghost. She's flesh and blood and currently in custody making wild accusations. Which is exactly why we need to be careful. If we push too hard, if we accuse the wrong person, then we find the right person. Elora set the folder down. Who benefits from Catherine's death? Her family. They got control of her dowry, her properties, not financially, emotionally. Who wanted you isolated and grieving? Understanding dawned in Rowan's eyes. Beatrice. She was Catherine's closest friend. She had access to the house, to Catherine, to... Elora's mind raced. Did she visit the day Catherine died? Yes. She brought the tonic. The words fell like an executioner's blade. Elora's hands went cold. And you never suspected... She was grieving too, or I thought she was. Rowan's face twisted. I was so buried in my own guilt I didn't see what was right in front of me. We need to talk to her, now, before her father's lawyers make this disappear. The constable won't let us near her. Then we don't ask permission. Elora was already moving toward the door. You're a duke. I'm your duchess, and we have questions about a murder. Rowan caught her arm. Elora, if I'm right, if Beatrice really did kill Catherine, then confronting her is dangerous. She's already tried to stab you once tonight. Good. Let her try again. This time there will be witnesses who matter. Elora met his eyes. You said I was a weapon, so let me be one. A long pause. Then Rowan nodded once. Get your cloak. We're going to the constabulary. The constabulary was a squat stone building that smelled of damp and desperation. The constable, a tired-looking man named Fletcher, met them at the entrance with barely concealed anxiety. Your Grace, I really don't think... Where is she? Rowan asked. In holding, but her father's solicitor is on the way, and I've been instructed... I don't care what you've been instructed. Rowan's voice could have frozen steel. That woman threatened my wife with a knife in front of 200 witnesses. I want to speak with her. Now. Fletcher's resistance crumbled. 5 minutes. That's all I can give you. They followed him through narrow corridors to a row of cells. Beatrice sat in the last one, her crimson gown torn and stained, her hair wild around her face. She looked up as they approached, and smiled. Come to gloat? She asked. Come for the truth, Elora said. The truth. Beatrice laughed, a harsh, broken sound. Which truth do you want? That Rowan never loved you? That you're a replacement for someone you could never measure up to? That every time he touches you, he's wishing you were her? I want the truth about how Catherine died. The smile slipped. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Elora stepped closer to the bars. You brought her a tonic the day she went into labor. What was in it? Medicine, herbs, something to ease the pain. Something to kill her. Beatrice's face went white, then red. That's insane. Is it? Rowan's voice was soft, deadly. Because the midwife who attended Catherine said the symptoms didn't match natural childbirth complications. She said it looked like poisoning, and then she died before she could testify. That's not my fault. Where did you get the tonic, Beatrice? An apothecary. Which one? I don't remember. Liar. Elora's voice cut like glass. You remember everything. You've been obsessed with Rowan for years. You orchestrated this whole thing, getting close to Catherine, gaining her trust. And then when she stood between you and what you wanted, I loved her. Beatrice's scream echoed off the stone walls. Catherine was my dearest friend. I would never— But you did. Rowan stepped forward, his face terrible in its stillness, because loving me mattered more than loving her. And when you realized I'd never choose you while she lived, you made sure she didn't. Beatrice's composure shattered. Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes were wild, frantic. You don't understand, she whispered. I had to. She was going to take you away from me forever. The baby. If the baby lived, you'd never need anyone else. You'd have an heir, a family, everything you wanted, and I'd be nothing. Just Catherine's friend, forever on the outside. Alara's blood ran cold. So you killed her. I saved you. Beatrice turned to Rowan, desperate. Don't you see? She was weak, too soft for the life you needed. She cried when you left for war. She made you feel guilty for doing your duty. But I understand you. I've always understood you. You're insane, Rowan breathed. I'm devoted. Beatrice gripped the bars. Everything I did for us. For the future we could have had if she just died quietly and let you take her place. Alara's voice shook with rage. That's what you wanted. That's what you've always wanted. Beatrice's face twisted. She didn't even fight. The tonic worked so fast. One moment she was smiling, talking about names for the baby, and the next— She stopped. Her eyes widened as she realized what she'd just admitted. Constable Fletcher, Rowan said quietly. I believe you just heard a confession to murder. Fletcher, who had been standing frozen in the corridor, jerked to attention. Yes, Your Grace. Beatrice lunged at the bars, her hands reaching through desperately. Rowan, please, you have to understand. I did it for you. Everything was for you. You killed my wife, Rowan said, each word precisely measured. You killed my child, and you've spent 2 years trying to convince me it was my fault. It was your fault, Beatrice shrieked. You were never there. You chose war over her. If you'd just been home, she'd still be alive because you wouldn't have had the chance to poison her. Rowan turned away. I hope you hang for this. Rowan, but he was already walking away, Alara at his side. Behind them, Beatrice's screams turned to sobs. They emerged into the cold night air. Rowan stopped on the steps, his chest heaving. Breathe, Alara said quietly. I can't. Yes, you can. Look at me. Breathe. He did. Slow, shaking breaths that gradually steadied. 2 years, he said finally. 2 years of blaming myself. And it was her, all along. I know. She killed Catherine. She killed my child. She tried to kill you. But she didn't. Alara took his hands. She failed. We're here. We're alive. And she's going to pay for what she did. Rowan's eyes were wet. I should have seen it. How could you? You were drowning in grief. That's what she counted on. If I'd been home, Catherine still would have trusted her best friend, still would have taken the tonic. The only difference is you'd have been there to watch her die. Alara's voice gentled. This isn't your fault, Rowan. It never was. He pulled her close, his arms tight around her. Not romantic, just desperate for something solid in a world that had just tilted on its axis. They stood like that for a long moment, the night cold around them. Then Rowan pulled back. We need to move fast. Beatrice's father will try to suppress this, but if we go public first, he can't bury it. Alara's mind raced. We need witnesses, people who heard her confession. Fletcher will testify. He's one constable. We need more. Alara thought of the ballroom, the crowd, the scandal. What if we call another gathering? Smaller this time. Invite only the people who matter, Lord Chancellor Margrave's peers, the magistrates, Catherine's family. And do what? Tell them everything. Show them the evidence. Make them hear Beatrice's confession from Fletcher's own mouth. Alara's voice hardened. Make it impossible for her father to protect her. Rowan stared at her. That's brilliant. That's necessary. Alara started toward their carriage. How quickly can you arrange it? 2 days. Maybe 3 if we need to compel attendance. Make it 2, before Margrave realizes what's happening and moves her somewhere we can't reach. They climbed into the carriage. As it lurched into motion, Rowan pulled out paper and began writing. Names, locations, strategies, planning like the general he'd been. Alara watched him, something shifting in her chest. This wasn't the cold, distant man she'd married. This was someone fighting for justice, for truth, for the memory of a woman he'd loved and the future he was trying to build. Rowan, she said quietly. He looked up. Yes? After this is done, after Beatrice is convicted and your name is cleared, what happens to us? He set down the pen. What do you want to happen? I don't know. Alara chose her words carefully. This started as a transaction, protection for both of us, but it's become something else. What else? A partnership. She met his eyes. I don't expect love, I don't expect romance, but I'd like to think we could be... She searched for the word. Friends. Eventually. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. I'd like that too, he said finally. The gathering happened in the House of Lords' private chambers, a wood-paneled room that smelled of old money and older secrets. Rowan had pulled every favor, called in every debt. 30 men sat around the massive table, their faces ranging from curious to hostile. Lord Chancellor Margrave sat at the far end, his expression carved from ice. This is highly irregular, Ashcroft, he said. Compelling a private session on such short notice. Murder is irregular, Rowan replied. I thought justice might outweigh convenience. Murmurs around the table. Margrave's face darkened. If this is about my daughter's unfortunate outburst at your ball, this is about your daughter confessing to poisoning my late wife. Rowan's voice cut through the room like a blade. In front of Constable Fletcher and my current wife, 2 days ago. Silence. That's absurd, Margrave said, but his voice wavered slightly. Is it? Alara stood, placing a folder on the table. These are the coroner's notes from Catherine Ashcroft's death. These are letters from the midwife who attended her, expressing concerns about the circumstances. And this, she pulled out a final document, is Constable Fletcher's sworn statement detailing Beatrice Margrave's confession. She slid the papers down the table. Men reached for them, began reading. The room's temperature dropped. This proves nothing, Margrave said desperately. My daughter was distraught, confused. Whatever she said, she described the poison's effects in detail, Rowan interrupted. Knew things only the person who administered it would know. And when pressed, she admitted to obtaining the tonic specifically to cause Catherine's death. Hearsay, witnessed by a constable and a duchess. Alara's voice was steel. Both of whom are willing to testify under oath. One of the other lords, an older man with sharp eyes, spoke up. Lord Chancellor, if these allegations have merit, they don't, Margrave snapped. My daughter is unwell. She's been under tremendous strain because she murdered someone and got away with it for 2 years, Alara said flatly, and because she believed she could do it again. She pulled out one more document, the threatening letters Beatrice had sent to Rowan. These arrived over the past month, threatening the Duke's new wife, promising the same fate that befell Catherine. We have handwriting analysis confirming they match Lady Beatrice's hand. The letters circulated. Men read them with growing horror. She's a murderer, Rowan said quietly, and she nearly killed again because her father's influence let her believe she was above justice. Margrave stood abruptly. This is a travesty. You have no right. I have every right. Rowan stood as well. Your daughter took everything from me, my wife, my child, 2 years of my life, and she would have taken more if I'd let her. She needs help. She needs a trial. The sharp-eyed lord spoke again. Lord Chancellor, with respect, these allegations are serious enough to warrant investigation. We cannot ignore them simply because of your family connections. Murmurs of agreement around the table. Margrave looked around wildly, seeing his support crumbling. You're making a mistake, he said, but the words were hollow. No, Alara said quietly. You made the mistake. You raised a daughter who thought love justified murder, and then you protected her when she should have faced consequences. The vote was called, 16 to 14 in favor of a formal investigation and trial. Margrave stormed from the room, but the damage was done. Beatrice would stand trial, and everyone would know. They emerged from the chambers to find a crowd waiting. News had spread somehow, servants gossiping, lords whispering to their wives. The scandal was already blooming. Alara saw familiar faces in the crowd. Women who had once been her friends, now staring at her with something like respect. Men who had dismissed her as ruined goods, now calculating her worth as a duchess who'd helped expose a murderer. And there, half hidden behind a column, was Lord Ashford. Their eyes met. He looked pale, shaken. Alara smiled. Then she turned to Rowan. One more thing to handle. Ashford? Ashford. They crossed the hall together. Ashford tried to slip away, but Rowan's guards blocked his path. Going somewhere? Rowan asked mildly. I have no business with you, Ashford said, his voice tight. But we have business with you. Alara stepped forward. 3 years ago, you assaulted me in a library. When I fought back, you spread lies to destroy my reputation. That's true and provable. Alara pulled out another document. She'd come prepared. This is a statement from the housekeeper at Lord Pemberton's estate, where the incident occurred. She confirms finding damage to the library desk consistent with my account. She also confirms hearing sounds of a struggle. Ashford's face went white. This is a statement from the dressmaker who examined my torn gown the next day. She documented every rip, every stain, and she's willing to testify that the damage was consistent with assault, not seduction. You have no... And this, Alara continued relentlessly, is a letter from Viscount Harlow, my former fiancé, stating that he broke our engagement because you personally told him I had tried to seduce you, that you pressured him to abandon me to protect his family's reputation. She laid all 3 documents on a nearby table. I have proof, she said softly. I've always had proof. I just didn't have the power to make anyone listen. But I do now. Ashford looked around desperately. The crowd was watching, listening. What do you want? He asked hoarsely. A confession, public, witnessed, admitting that you assaulted me and lied to cover your crime. I'll be ruined. Yes. Alara's voice was cold. You will, just like I was. Except you'll deserve it. Ashford's hands shook. And if I refuse, then I take this to the magistrates. I take it to every newspaper in London. I make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. She leaned in. Your choice. Confess now with some dignity, or be dragged through the mud publicly. A long, terrible silence. Then Ashford's shoulders sagged. I did it, he said, his voice barely audible. I assaulted Miss Vance, and I lied about it to protect myself. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Louder, Rowan said. Ashford looked up, his face twisted with humiliation. I assaulted Alara Vance 3 years ago. I spread lies to destroy her reputation because I was afraid she'd report me. Everything she lost was my fault. The crowd erupted. Alara stood perfectly still, letting the words wash over her. 3 years. 3 years of silence and shame and exile. And now everyone knew. Rowan's hand found hers, squeezing gently. It's done, he murmured. Not quite. Alara turned to the crowd, raising her voice. Lord Ashford has confessed to assault and defamation. I expect the magistrates to pursue appropriate charges. And I expect society to remember this the next time a woman's reputation is destroyed by a man's lies. She didn't wait for a response. She simply turned and walked away, Rowan beside her. Behind them, the crowd's whispers rose like a wave, but Alara didn't look back. That night, back at the Ashcroft townhouse, Alara stood in her chambers staring at her reflection. She looked different. Not just the gown, the jewels, the title. She looked like someone who had fought and won. A knock at the door. Rowan entered carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. Thought you might need this, he said. She took the glass gratefully. It's really over. Beatrice will stand trial. Ashford is ruined. Your name is cleared. Our names, Rowan corrected. You did this as much as I did. We did it together. They drank in companionable silence. What happens now? Alara asked finally. Now we figure out what comes next. Rowan set down his glass. The marriage contract said nothing about what happens after we win. No, it didn't. Alara studied him. Do you want me to leave? No. The answer came immediately. Unless you want to. I don't. Alara surprised herself with the honesty. I know this started as a transaction, but somewhere along the way it became real, Rowan finished. Yes, He stepped closer, not touching, just close. I'm not good at this, he said quietly, at being a husband, at anything that isn't war or strategy or violence. I'm not good at being a duchess, or trusting people, or believing I deserve anything good. Then we'll figure it out together. Alara smiled. Together. Rowan raised his glass. To partnership. To partnership, she echoed. They drank. And for the first time since this whole impossible thing began, Alara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The trial of Lady Beatrice Margrave began on a cold morning in late autumn. The courtroom was packed, standing room only, with people pressed against the walls and spilling out into the corridors. Everyone who mattered had come, and everyone who didn't matter had come anyway, desperate to witness the spectacle. Alara sat in the front row beside Rowan, her hands folded carefully in her lap. She wore dark gray, respectful but not mourning, a duchess, but also a witness. Beatrice entered in shackles, her face gaunt and colorless. She didn't look at Rowan, didn't look at Alara. She stared straight ahead as if she could will herself somewhere else. The prosecution laid out their case with clinical precision. The coroner's notes, the midwife's letters, Fletcher's testimony about the confession, the threatening letters with their matched handwriting. Beatrice's lawyer, a slick man hired by her father, tried to argue temporary insanity, emotional distress, anything to reduce the charges. But then they called Alara to the stand. She walked to the witness box with her head high, aware of every eye tracking her movement. The prosecutor, a stern woman named Mrs. Blackwell, began gently. Your Grace, can you describe the events of the night Lady Beatrice threatened you? Alara recounted it carefully. The ball. The knife. Beatrice's words. And then the visit to the constabulary, where Beatrice had confessed. And what exactly did she say? Mrs. Blackwell asked. Alara's voice didn't waver. She said Catherine didn't fight, that the tonic worked fast, that one moment Catherine was talking about baby names, and the next... She paused, meeting Beatrice's eyes across the courtroom. And then she stopped herself, because she realized what she'd admitted. The courtroom was silent. And you're certain these were her exact words? I'm certain. So is my husband. So is Constable Fletcher. The defense attorney rose, smoothing his coat. Your Grace, isn't it true that you had reason to want Lady Beatrice imprisoned? That she represented a threat to your new marriage? She represented a threat to my life, Alara corrected. She came at me with a knife in front of 200 witnesses. That's not a rivalry. That's attempted murder. But you provoked her. I existed, Alara said sharply. That was my provocation. I married a man she believed belonged to her, and she couldn't tolerate it. So yes, I wanted her stopped, but not because I'm vindictive, because I'm not interested in dying for someone else's delusions. A few people in the gallery murmured approval. The defense attorney tried a different approach. You've benefited greatly from this marriage, haven't you? A woman with a ruined reputation suddenly elevated to duchess. Objection, Mrs. Blackwell snapped. Relevance? I'm establishing motive. The witness's marriage circumstances have nothing to do with Lady Beatrice's confession to murder, the judge agreed. The defense attorney sat down, frustrated. When Alara returned to her seat, Rowan's hand found hers beneath the edge of the bench. A brief squeeze. Solidarity. The trial lasted 3 days. By the end, even Beatrice's own lawyer looked defeated. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty on all counts: murder, attempted murder, criminal conspiracy. The judge sentenced her to hang. Beatrice finally looked at Rowan then, her eyes desperate and wild. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. She was led away in chains. Lord Chancellor Margrave sat stone-faced in the gallery, his career in ruins alongside his daughter's life. Alara felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just exhaustion. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. When Alara and Rowan emerged, a strange thing happened. Someone applauded. Then another. And another. Not everyone. Not even most. But enough that Alara stopped on the steps, startled. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. Middle-aged, plainly dressed, her face lined with years of hard living. "Thank you," she said simply. "My sister was ruined by a man's lies 5 years ago. No one believed her either, but you You made them listen. She pressed something into Alara's hand, a handkerchief embroidered with flowers. Then she disappeared back into the crowd. Alara looked down at the small gift, her throat tight. They're watching, Rowan murmured, all of them, wondering what you'll do next. What I'll do next, Alara repeated. Then she turned to face the crowd, raised her voice. If anyone here has been silenced, if anyone has been destroyed by lies, come find me. I'll listen, and I'll help however I can. It wasn't a grand speech. It wasn't eloquent, but it was real, and the crowd heard it. The weeks that followed were chaos of a different kind. Letters arrived by the dozen, women sharing their stories, asking for help, desperate for someone to believe them. Alara read every one. She couldn't help them all, but she tried. She started small. A fund for women who needed legal representation, connections to lawyers willing to take cases others wouldn't touch. Her name, the Ashcroft name, used as a shield for people who had none. Rowan helped. He didn't always understand, didn't always know the right thing to say, but he showed up. He used his influence. He made people listen. Their marriage evolved in those weeks. Not into romance, not yet, maybe not ever, but into something solid, dependable. They learned each other's rhythms. Rowan worked late into the night, so Alara brought him coffee and sat reading in his study, a comfortable presence that didn't demand conversation. Alara had nightmares sometimes, waking gasping and disoriented, and Rowan would appear at her door, never intrusive, just checking. I'm fine, she'd say. I know, he'd reply, and he'd leave. But the door would stay cracked open, and somehow that made the darkness less oppressive. One evening, about 6 weeks after the trial, they were working in the study when Graves appeared with a visitor. Lady Cordelia Thorne. She stood in the doorway looking older and more uncertain than she had at the ball. Your Grace, she said, addressing Alara. Might I have a word? Alara gestured to a chair. Cordelia sat stiffly, her hands clasped in her lap. I owe you an apology, she said without preamble. At your wedding ball, I was cruel. I judged you without knowing you. And I was wrong. You were grieving, Alara said quietly. That's not an excuse. Cordelia's voice shook slightly. Catherine would have been ashamed of me. She believed in forgiveness, in second chances, in... She stopped, composing herself. In seeing the best in people. I forgot that. You remembered it when it mattered, Alara said. You supported the investigation. You testified about Beatrice's behavior toward Catherine before her death. That took courage. It took too long. Cordelia looked at Rowan. I should have questioned things sooner, but I was so angry at you for surviving when she didn't that I couldn't see clearly. Rowan's expression softened slightly. I was angry at myself for the same reason. I understand. Cordelia nodded, then she turned back to Alara. Catherine kept a journal. I've been holding on to it since she died. Couldn't bring myself to read it. But recently I did. And there's an entry about you. Alara blinked. About me? From years ago. You met her at some charity function. You don't remember, probably. It was brief. But she wrote that you were kind to a serving girl who'd spilled wine on a guest, that you defended her when others would have had her dismissed. Cordelia pulled out a small leather-bound book. She wrote, Met the most interesting girl today, Alara Vance. She has a spine of steel beneath all that propriety. I think we could have been friends. Alara's eyes burned. She hadn't known Catherine, not really, but reading those words, knowing that someone had seen her, truly seen her, even in passing. Keep it, Cordelia said, offering the journal. I think she'd want you to have it. Alara took it carefully, like it might shatter. Thank you. Cordelia stood. You're good for him, she said, nodding toward Rowan. Better than I wanted to admit. Catherine would have approved. After she left, Alara sat with the journal in her lap, not quite ready to open it. You all right? Rowan asked. I don't know. Alara traced the worn leather. It's strange, isn't it? Building a life on the foundation of someone else's death. We're not building on her death. We're building despite it. Rowan moved to sit beside her. Catherine's gone. Nothing we do changes that. But we're still here. And we get to decide what that means. Alara finally opened the journal. The pages were filled with Catherine's neat handwriting, observations, thoughts, sketches. A life captured in ink. She found the entry Cordelia had mentioned, read it twice. She saw me, Alara said softly, even when I couldn't see myself. She was good at that. They sat together in the quiet, the fire crackling, two people learning how to build something new from broken pieces. Winter arrived, and with it, an unexpected complication. Alara missed her monthly courses. At first she dismissed it, stress, the trial, everything that had happened. But when the second month passed, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She told the physician first. Then, that evening, she told Rowan. They were in his study, their study, really, since she spent as much time there as he did now. He was reviewing estate accounts. She was drafting a letter to a woman in Dover who'd written asking for help. I need to tell you something, she said, setting down her pen. Rowan looked up. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, I don't think, but... She took a breath. I'm pregnant. The silence stretched. Rowan set down his own pen very carefully. You're certain? The physician confirmed it this morning. And you're... He seemed to be struggling for words. How do you feel about it? Terrified, Alara admitted. We haven't... This wasn't supposed to. I know. They stared at each other across the desk. I'm sorry, Alara said. I know this complicates things. The marriage contract never mentioned... Stop! Rowan stood, moving around the desk. He knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands. You don't need to apologize. This is... He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. This is good news. If you want it to be. Do you? Yes. The answer came without hesitation. I lost one child. I won't lose another. Whatever you need, whatever this means for us, we'll figure it out. Alara's eyes filled. I'm scared. So am I. Rowan's grip tightened. But we'll be scared together. The pregnancy progressed. Slowly at first, then all at once. Alara's body changed in ways that fascinated and terrified her. Rowan became almost comically protective, hiring extra physicians, researching every possible complication, driving everyone slightly insane with his worry. You need to breathe, Alara told him one evening in her 6th month. They were sitting in the library, her feet propped on a cushion, his hand resting absently on her swollen belly. I am breathing. No, you're panicking quietly. There's a difference. I'm not... He stopped as the baby kicked against his palm. His eyes widened. Was that... That was your daughter, saying hello. They'd found out it was a girl a month ago. Rowan had gone very quiet when the physician told them, then excused himself and didn't return for an hour. Alara had found him in Catherine's old room, sitting on the floor, crying. I wanted this with her, he'd said. A daughter, a family. And now I get it with you, and I don't know if I'm allowed to be happy about it. You're allowed, Alara had said, sitting beside him. Catherine would want you to be happy. Now, feeling the baby move, Rowan's expression was wonder and terror in equal measure. What if I fail her? He asked quietly. You won't. I failed Catherine. You didn't. Beatrice did. And we made sure she paid for it. Alara covered his hand with hers. You're going to be a good father because you care this much about getting it right. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I, but we'll learn. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. Rowan laughed, surprised and rough and genuine. And Alara realized something. She loved him. Not the desperate, passionate love of fairy tales, but something quieter, steadier, built on trust and partnership and shared survival. She didn't tell him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But she felt it. And that was enough. The baby came early. Not dangerously so, but enough to send everyone into a controlled panic. Alara labored for 16 hours. Rowan stayed the entire time, ignoring the physician's protests that husbands didn't belong in birthing rooms. I wasn't there last time, he said flatly. I'm not leaving now. So he stayed, held her hand, let her curse at him, wiped sweat from her forehead with a cool cloth. And when their daughter finally arrived, small and red and screaming, he wept. They named her Catherine Alara Ashcroft, a bridge between past and present, a promise that grief didn't have to be the end of the story. Alara held her daughter and felt something shift fundamentally in her chest. This tiny, furious creature was hers, hers to protect, hers to raise, hers to make sure never felt small or silenced or invisible. She's perfect, Rowan whispered, touching one tiny fist. She's loud, Alara said, but she was smiling. Takes after her mother. I'm not loud. You obliterated a murderer and a rapist in the span of a week. You're definitely loud. Alara laughed, then winced. Don't make me laugh. Everything hurts. Sorry, but he was grinning. The first year was hard. Babies didn't sleep. Alara was exhausted constantly. Rowan tried to help, but had no idea what he was doing most of the time. But they managed. They hired a good nurse. They took turns walking the halls with a screaming infant at 3 in the morning. They learned to function on no sleep and cold tea and brief moments of quiet when Catherine finally dozed off. And slowly, their household became something neither of them had expected. A home. Not perfect, not always peaceful, but real. Alara continued her work helping women who'd been silenced. It was harder now with a baby, but she made it work. She brought Catherine to meetings sometimes, the baby sleeping in a basket while Alara reviewed cases. Rowan took a seat in the House of Lords and started pushing for legal reforms. Protection for women in marriage contracts, harsher penalties for assault, better investigation procedures. He was relentless, and because he was a decorated war hero and a duke, people listened. They made enemies. Lord Ashford, ruined and bitter, spread vicious rumors. Several of Catherine's relatives still refused to acknowledge Alara, and there were always whispers about Alara's past, about Rowan's grief, about whether their marriage was real or just performance. But they weathered it, together. On Catherine's first birthday, they hosted a small gathering, just close friends and family. Margot brought her new husband. Cordelia came with flowers from Catherine's favorite garden. Even Graves smiled as he watched the baby destroy a carefully prepared cake. Alara stood on the terrace afterward, watching the sun set over the gardens. Rowan joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. To surviving the first year, he said, offering her a glass. To surviving everything, she corrected. They drank. I never thanked you, Rowan said after a moment. For what? For saying yes. That night in the ballroom. You could have run. Should have run, probably, but you didn't. Neither did you. Alara studied him. You could have chosen someone easier. Someone who wouldn't come with scandal and demands and a vendetta against half of society. But then, I wouldn't have you. The words hung between them, simple, but weighted with meaning. Rowan, Alara said carefully. What are we doing? What do you mean? This marriage. It started as a transaction, but it's become, she searched for the word, something else. What do you want it to be? She turned to face him fully. I want it to be real. Not just legal, not just strategic, real. Rowan set down his glass. It's been real for me for a while now. Since when? Since you walked into that constabulary and demanded answers about Catherine's death. Since you stood in front of the House of Lords and refused to back down. Since, he stopped. Since I realized you weren't just surviving alongside me. You were building something, and I wanted to build it with you. Alara's breath caught. You should have said something. I didn't know if you felt the same. I do. She stepped closer. I love you. Not the way I thought I'd love someone. It's not poetry or grand gestures. It's partnership, Rowan finished. It's knowing someone will stand beside you when everything falls apart. Yes, I love you too, he said, in case that wasn't clear. Alara laughed, wet and surprised. It really wasn't. Then let me be clear. He took her hands. I love you, Alara Ashcroft. I love your stubbornness and your rage and the way you refuse to let anyone make you small. I love that you fight for people who can't fight for themselves. And I love that you chose to fight for me even when you had every reason not to. She kissed him then. Not their first kiss. They'd had a few, brief and uncertain, in the months since Catherine's birth, but this one was different. This one was a promise. When they pulled apart, Rowan was smiling. Took us long enough. We're slow learners. Speak for yourself. From inside, they heard Catherine start to cry. Alara sighed. Duty calls. I'll get her. Rowan headed toward the door, then paused. Alara? Yes? Thank you for all of it, for saying yes, for staying, for... He gestured vaguely at everything. For making me believe in second chances. She smiled. Thank you for giving me mine. He went inside. Alara stayed on the terrace a moment longer, watching the last light fade from the sky. 3 years ago, she'd been invisible, ruined. A cautionary tale whispered in drawing rooms. Now she was a duchess, a mother, a force that had reshaped the lives around her. But more than that, she was seen, not as a scandal or a prize or a replacement, just as herself. And that, Alara thought, was worth everything. 2 years later, the ballroom that had once been her prison became the site of her triumph. They were hosting a charity gala, raising funds for Alara's foundation, which had grown to help hundreds of women across the country. The same room that had whispered about her disgrace now rang with applause for her work. Alara stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching couples dance. Catherine was upstairs with her nurse, hopefully sleeping. Rowan was across the room, speaking with potential donors, charming them with surprising ease. He caught her eye and smiled, not the cold, distant expression she'd first seen, but something warm, real. She smiled back. Your Grace. Alara turned. A young woman stood there, maybe 20, wearing a simple gown that had been carefully mended. Her face was nervous but determined. Can I help you? Alara asked gently. I wanted to thank you. My name is Sarah Winters. You helped my sister last year. She'd been... The girl's voice caught. A man hurt her, and everyone said it was her fault. But you listened. You helped her get justice, and now she's rebuilding her life. Alara's chest tightened. I'm glad I could help. It's more than help. Sarah's eyes shone. You gave her hope. You showed her that being broken doesn't mean being finished. Your sister did that herself. You made it possible. Sarah pressed something into Alara's hand. A letter. She wanted you to have this. And I wanted you to know you've changed things. For women like us, you've made it safer to speak up. She left before Alara could respond. Alara unfolded the letter, read the first line. Dear Your Grace, you probably don't remember me, but you saved my life. She couldn't read the rest. Not right now. Not without crying in front of half of society. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her bodice, next to her heart. Rowan appeared at her side. Everything all right? Yes. Alara blinked back tears. Better than all right? Dance with me. We're hosting. We should be mingling. Dance with me anyway. He led her to the floor. The orchestra was playing a waltz, the same one from that first night, though Alara hadn't realized it until now. They moved together easily now, no stumbling, no hesitation. Two people who'd learned each other's rhythms through trial and fire. Do you remember this? Rowan asked. The waltz? The moment. Standing in this room, everyone staring, everything impossible. I remember thinking I was insane for saying yes. And now? Now I think it was the sanest thing I've ever done. She met his eyes. You gave me my life back. No, Rowan said quietly. You took it back. I just gave you the tools. The music swelled. Around them other couples danced, but Alara barely noticed. She was too busy noticing the way the light caught Rowan's silver-touched hair, the way his hand rested at her waist, possessive but gentle. The way he looked at her like she was the only person in the room. What are you thinking? He asked. That I love you, and that I'm grateful. For what? For choosing me, that night, when you could have chosen anyone. Rowan's expression softened. There was never anyone else. From the moment I saw you in that corner, hiding but not broken, I knew. Knew what? That you'd be magnificent if someone just gave you the chance. Alara's throat tightened. I'm not magnificent. You are. You just couldn't see it yet. He spun her gently. But you do now, don't you? She thought about the foundation, the women she'd helped, the laws Rowan had pushed through, the daughter sleeping upstairs, the life they'd built from nothing but desperation and hope. Yes, she said, I do. The waltz ended, the room applauded, but Alara didn't move. Neither did Rowan. They stood in the center of the ballroom holding each other while the world spun on around them. And Alara realized this was what victory looked like. Not revenge, though they'd had that. Not vindication, though they'd had that too. But this, standing in the light with someone who saw you completely and chose you anyway, building something good from the wreckage, refusing to let the past define your future. Ready to go back to work? Rowan asked, nodding toward the waiting donors. Not quite. Alara rose on her toes and kissed him, brief but genuine. Now I'm ready. They separated, moving through the crowd together but apart. A duchess and a duke. Partners. Parents. People who had survived and thrived. Alara caught her reflection in one of the ballroom mirrors. She looked different than she had 3 years ago. Older. Stronger. Sure of herself in a way she'd never been. She looked like someone who belonged, not because of her title or her marriage, but because she'd fought for her place and won. The evening wore on. Donations were pledged, promises were made, and when Alara finally escaped to the terrace for a breath of air, she found Margot waiting. There you are, Margot said, pulling her into a hug. I've been trying to catch you all night. It's been chaos. Good chaos. Margot pulled back, studying her. You look happy. I am. I'm glad. Margot's voice caught. After everything you've been through, you deserve it. We both do. Alara squeezed her cousin's hands. Thank you for never giving up on me, for dragging me to that first ball even when I didn't want to go. Best decision I ever made, Margot smiled. Though I'll admit, I didn't expect it to end with you married to a duke and running a foundation that's changing the country. Neither did I. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the lights of the city spread out below. Do you ever miss it? Margot asked. The before, when things were simpler. Alara considered the question. No. Simple isn't always good, and I like who I've become. Who's that? Someone who doesn't hide anymore. Inside, the music started again. Laughter drifted out through the open doors, life continuing, messy and beautiful and real. Alara took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. Then she went back inside, back to her husband, her work, her life. No longer the woman in the shadows, but the woman who'd stepped into the light and refused to leave. And when someone asked her to dance, not Rowan this time, but one of the younger lords who'd once ignored her completely, she said yes. Because she could. Because she deserved to be here. Because 3 years ago, in this very room, she'd made a choice that had changed everything. And she'd make it again, every single time. The night ended late. Guests departed in waves, their carriages rattling over cobblestones. Servants cleaned up champagne glasses and flower petals. The ballroom slowly emptied until only Alara and Rowan remained, standing where it had all begun. Successful night, Rowan said. Very. Tired? Exhausted. But she was smiling. Come on. He offered his arm. Let's go check on our daughter and then get some sleep. They climbed the stairs together, the house quiet around them. Catherine was sleeping peacefully, one tiny fist curled near her cheek. They stood over her crib for a moment, two people who'd been broken and lost, now bound together by this small, perfect thing they'd created. She's going to change the world, Alara whispered. Just like her mother, Rowan said. Alara looked at him. We did it, didn't we? We actually survived. We did better than survive. He pulled her close. We won. And standing there in the quiet dark, their daughter sleeping between them, Alara knew it was true. They'd won. Not against their enemies, though those battles had been fought and finished, but against the voices that said they were broken beyond repair, against the world that tried to keep them small, against every odd that said love couldn't be built from strategic alliance and shared survival. They'd won, and their victory wasn't loud or dramatic. It was this: a quiet house, a sleeping child, two people who'd learned to trust each other completely. It was enough. It was everything. Alara leaned into Rowan's embrace, letting herself rest for the first time in years, and somewhere in the shadows she'd once hidden in, a ghost smiled. Not Catherine's ghost. She'd been avenged, mourned, and gently released. But Alara's own ghost. The woman she'd been 3 years ago. Broken. Silent. Invisible. That woman was gone now, and in her place stood someone new. Someone forged in fire and fury. someone who would never hide again.